Tornado Alley is living by its name as we're looking at possibly significant tornado and severe weather outbreaks for the next 2 days, all the way from the northern plains to portions of the deep south. We're seeing nearly 5,000 plus joules per kilogram here, and as well, very high numbers up to 20 plus for this significant tornado parameter. So we're looking at possibly tornado outbreaks with these events here. We do now have a very large moderate risk for today with a 15% hatch risk for tornadoes across northwestern and north central Kansas, and as well, we cannot forget about tomorrow, a very large enhanced risk and possibly a moderate possible. But without further ado, let's get into the timing and as well the forecast. We're going to be looking at the National Weather Service for a few seconds here as we are already seeing a few severe thunderstorm warnings being issued here across portions of northwestern Kansas. So no, this is not the main event. When we start to see the first main event, it'll start to begin across portions of Wyoming, northeastern Colorado, and portions of western Nebraska, as we'll be watching for around the mid-afternoon hours here for Central and Mountain Time. But we are already starting to see some favorable conditions, though, for portions of northwestern Kansas. Already seeing Cape values of over 2,000 joules per kilogram, as well temperatures already nearly into the high 70s already. So we're talking very favorable conditions at the moment here, which is why today is going to be such a big concern when we get to the main event. Because by the main event, we're talking nearly 80 plus degrees there, getting into 5,000 plus joules per kilogram. We're seeing storms with Helicity over 500 meters squared per second squared. I mean, we're just talking about extremely favorable conditions. That's why today can very well be not only a severe weather outbreak, but a tornado outbreak here for portions of Nebraska and Kansas. I mean, it's about time that we have a significant tornado outbreak for portions of the plains. I mean, our main outbreaks have been in the Dixie Alley for May in the early time period the first week, but we have not really seen a major moderate plus risk so far for the tornado alley really this month of May. So it's about time we start it's about time that we see something like this, but definitely expected this earlier on in the month of May. But again, we already see some pretty big storms developing here across northwestern Kansas. We could start to see a few maybe warnings out there near Colorado soon, as well Nebraska. But again, mainly these are just for significant winds and hail, because I mean, we do have a moderate risk for every single event today: hail, wind, and tornadoes. So I mean, today's overall a pretty big day here, and as well, experiencing already flash flooded watches across portions of the other side of Kansas, as we're expecting their severe weather for the next 2 days. So some significant amounts of rain there. So here's a look now at today, and as you do see, we have a very large area of that moderate risk today, all the way from northeastern Colorado to much of southwestern Nebraska to much of north central and northwestern Kansas. And that's exactly where I expected that the main outbreak to be, kind of for portions of the southern Nebraska area and northwestern Kansas, and that's exactly what I predicted, and that's exactly the outcome as well. We do have some large severe weather across portions of the northeast, but obviously we're not really focused on that. We're focused on the main event right here, which is that large moderate risk here for again, like I said, Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas. We have up to 337,000 people under the moderate risk, including Kearney, Nebraska, North Platte, Nebraska, Hastings, Nebraska, Hayes, Kansas, and Lexington, Nebraska. So if anybody that you know lives there or you live there that I just mentioned in that moderate risk, I would recommend you guys do have a plan place, because we do have a pretty big threat for every single event today, a moderate for every single event: wind, hail, and tornadoes. So there's a very good chance you guys are going to be expecting tornadoes within your region, extremely large hail, and damaging winds. So I would definitely have a tornado plan. I'll actually go ahead and go maybe to the store or something like that to get, such as flashlights, maybe a generator, you name it. I mean, just be ready if you are in those cities that I just mentioned there. Enhanced sources as well, pretty large and widespread, all the way from areas just outside Kansas City there in Omaha, Nebraska, all the way up to areas like Wyoming. So we actually have a very large enhanced risk as well. And we do actually have around 1.4 million people within this enhanced risk, including Lincoln, Nebraska, Topeka, Kansas, Salina, Kansas, Manhattan, Kansas, and Grand Island, Nebraska. So really watching out for some very widespread severe weather. And then we can go ahead and just skip the slight risk. We do have around 56 million people under the slight risk, but obviously mainly of those are in the Northeast. But Kansas City, Amarillo, St. Joseph, you guys are in the cities that are included in that slight risk for the tornado alley. Tornado risk is very, very high, like I just said. We do have a moderate risk for tornadoes. We have not had a 15% significant risk for tornadoes since, was it April? I mean, it's been quite a long time since we've had a 15% chance significant risk for tornadoes. I mean, I think the last time we saw that was like in the Mississippi and Louisiana day or something like that in April. So this is definitely been a long time here. So 15% chance significant risk for 79,000 people. 79,000 people. So thankfully it's more in a very, very rural area, and it's actually in a very small area compared to the moderate risk. So here's a look now at the 15% chance here for the tornado risk. Actually, let me go ahead and make it less thick so you guys can get a reality. So here's a look now at the 15% chance and compare it to the moderate risk. So as you do see, it's a specific area where we are watching for the worst of the tornadoes today. So 79,000 people. So if you're in that 15% chance significant risk, there's a very good chance we can have some type of tornadoes within 25 miles of your area. So the hatch 10% or greater probability means EF2 or EF5 tornadoes within 25 miles of point. So we are actually above that 10% chance. We're at a 50% chance significant risk. So when we are really talking about very strong tornadoes possibly today, the only city that's actually mentioned in that 15% chance significant risk is Hays, Kansas. So if you live in Hays, Kansas, you are in the middle of the outbreak for today, and you are only within the 79,000 of that 15% chance significant risk. So I would definitely keep a very, very close eye on today. And the general significant severe risk includes around 302,000 people, and including much of the other portion of the moderate risk. So the other portion of the moderate risk is under the enhanced risk for tornadoes. So we do have Garden City, Kansas, Dodge City, Kansas. Let's actually go back here. Dodge City as well under that 10% chance significant risk. So it's also including southwestern Kansas. So much of western Kansas is going to get hammered today. Let's just say that. And as well, much of western Nebraska is going to get hammered today. So Garden City, Dodge City, Hays, Kansas, and Great Bend, you guys are under that 10% or 15% chance hatched. The 10% chance in general, though, does include around 436,000, including Kearney, Garden City, Dodge City, North Platte, and Hastings, and a very large 5% all the way from Wyoming to portions of north central and northwestern Texas, including around 1.4 million people. Lubbock, Amarillo, Salina, Grand Island, and Hutchinson, you guys are under that 5%. The wind threat as well, like I did say, a moderate risk for wind, 45% chance significant risk, and that's another reason why this moderate is so widespread, because the wind threat is going to be a little bit just outside that tornado threat there, or at least the worst of the tornado threat. So here's the 45% chance for winds, and you kind of see it's a little bit on the edge there of that moderate risk, and that's exactly why the moderate is so widespread. You're probably wondering why it's such a big moderate risk. And the tornado threat's that small and compared to the moderate, and there you see that's exactly why, the wind. So 45% chance, and you kind of see it's kind of just overlapping that northern portion of that tornado threat and right on the edge of that moderate risk. So we do have a very, it's pretty large, 45% chance, but it's in a really rural area. So it only includes around 218,000 people, including Kearney, Hays, again, Hays, Kansas, in the middle of the outbreak. You guys are not only under the 50% chance hatch, but you are included in the 45% chance hatch. So, I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. But yeah, a 45% chance, including Kearney, Hastings, Hays, and Lexington. Of course, every single person in that 45% chance is under the 45% chance SIG. So we're talking 65 knots or greater within 25 miles of your area. So we're talking possibly power outages and extreme damage, and even power lines to go down and trees to be uprooted without even having tornadoes. So we're going to be seeing already significant damage in these areas. 30% chance as well, pretty widespread, including around 1.4 million people. Lincoln, Topeka, Salina, Manhattan, and Grand Isle, you guys are under that 30% chance, with a big portion of that under the hatch risk. And last but not least, look at the hail threat. And the hail threat is very large. I mean, we not only have a 45% chance SIG, we have a 30% chance SIG and a 15% chance SIG. So this is an overall pretty big hail day today, and this is the reason why this moderate risk is so large, is because of the hail threat. So I think we're seeing a larger hail threat than anything today. That it covers almost all of the it covers basically all of the moderate risk, basically including northeastern Colorado, much of southwestern Nebraska, and much of western Kansas. So again, the significant severe risk includes around 2 million people, all the way from Lubbock and Amarillo up to areas like Grand Isle, Nebraska, and Salina, Kansas. 45% chance includes around 263,000 people. Kearney, North Platte, once again Hayes, and Lexington, Nebraska, with a very large 30% chance there as well, including around 500,000 people. Let's now go ahead and check a look now at day 2, because obviously day 2 is pretty significant as well. We have a very large, widespread enhanced risk here. We have around 10.5 million people under this enhanced risk. OKC there, Tulsa, Wichita, St. Louis, and Springfield, Missouri, and all the way up to almost Springfield, Illinois. So we're actually having a ton of people. This is a very, very large enhanced risk. I mean, all the way from northwestern Texas throughout much of Oklahoma, much of Missouri, much of northern Arkansas, much of southeastern Kansas, and much of southwestern Illinois. So, I mean, there's definitely a pretty big threat for a moderate risk to be issued at some point, possibly by tomorrow, and as well as really large slight risk all the way from the Texas border there with Mexico to areas like Evansville, Indiana. So we do have around 6 million people in that slight risk. Let's go ahead and look at the threat. We do have a very, very small 10% chance for tornadoes. It may go hashed or not, but 10% includes around 316,000 people. Bardsville, Ponca City, Miami, Oklahoma, Winfield, and Arkansas City, Kansas. And then a very large 5%, including around 6 million people from Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita, Springfield, and Norman. Now let's go look at the wind threat there. Very large 30% chance, including around 10. This is actually the reason why this enhancer is so big, because of the wind threat there. So the SIG risk is a little bit smaller though. So only around 5 million people, including Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Springfield, Missouri, Broken Arrow, and Edmond, Oklahoma. And then of course the hail threat's going to be a little bit smaller there, only including around 1.5 million people in that significant severe risk, with around just under less than that in the 30% chance, including Joplin, Enid, Stillwater, Bardsville, and Ponca City. Let's now go ahead and look now at the HRR here on the model here to get a look at the timing and location for the worst supercells. So at the moment, we are seeing a few storms like you did see in the National Weather Service. We do have a few severe thunderstorm warnings, and there's a few storms there across portions of northwestern Kansas and near the border of Colorado and Nebraska. So there will be a few storms blowing up right now, but these really won't be a big severe threat, and those kind of push on into central Nebraska by around 4 o'clock Eastern and 3 o'clock Central. Let's now go ahead and get a look here at the worst timing. That's when these storms start to blow up here all the way from Wyoming, and they make these cells that develop in Wyoming will be the big outbreak here. Once they actually make their way into a favorable atmosphere like Nebraska, Colorado, that's when they start to become supercells, and not only supercells, but surface-based supercells. And we're looking at a very high rotation possibly within these supercells. That's exactly why we're going to be seeing such a big threat for tornadoes. So by 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central is when these storms start to actually blow up here. So it's going to be a little bit later here. We're not talking early afternoon. By 7 to 8 o'clock here Eastern, then we're starting to see these extremely wide supercells all the way from South Dakota to even all the way down to Texas. So we're just including much of Tornado Alley, and a lot of these will have embedded supercells like here in portions of western Kansas, as well across northeastern Colorado and Nebraska. And this is the reason why we have such a big widespread hail threat, because all these will have extremely significant hail coming. The lapse rates are going to be extremely high throughout this region here, but really watching out for the main tornadic supercells that kind of would be within western Kansas and western Nebraska. By 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central, we're talking this has become more of a QLCS, or not QLCS, more like a linear squall line here, all the way from South Dakota to Texas. So as we go later into the overnight hours, the tornado threat will kind of die off a little bit, but we will still see some overnight tornadoes, because we're still talking about embedded supercells within these cells into central Kansas by midnight, so 11 o'clock Central. But by the time we get to around 11 o'clock Central to 10 o'clock Central, a lot of these storms will become more elevated base, and that's exactly why we'll be seeing more of a wind and hail threat overnight and less of a tornado threat. As well, watching out for tomorrow, though, we could see some strong storms tomorrow morning across Missouri and the southern Midwest. But as we now get into 4 o'clock, so we're talking a little bit earlier timing-wise tomorrow, so we'll be a few hours earlier. By 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central, we're talking a very large and intense squall line for a portion of south and much of eastern Kansas, and as well even from northern Oklahoma. These as well can bring in some really intense winds and as well some very intense hail. And as we go later on now into around 6 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Central, we're seeing these storms developing all the way from northwestern Texas to portions of Missouri, and of course we're watching out for some embedded supercells within this linear squall line, specifically here across portions of Oklahoma by 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. We're looking at possibly some embedded supercells that can bring in some tornadoes across Oklahoma, as well even watching out for some tornadoes and for southeastern Kansas and as well for portions of the panhandle of Texas. Let's now go ahead and look at the Cape values here. So we're already seeing within the next hour or so, we're going to start seeing some really good Cape values here already. Nearly 4,000 plus joules per kilogram there across Oklahoma and Texas. But we're starting to see already nearly 1,000 to as high as 2,500 joules per kilogram here, where we start to see that severe weather right now. So that's why we have so many severe thunderstorm warnings right now for northwestern Kansas, because the Cape values are able to sustain them nearly 3,000 joules per kilogram already. So if we're already seeing 3,000 now, imagine in the evening hours. As we now get to around 5 o'clock Eastern, that's kind of when these storms start to develop from Wyoming. So these storms will kind of blow up here, but they won't become supercells or surface-based until they get towards northeastern Colorado, western Nebraska, and western Kansas, because the conditions are way better. But look at that, nearly 5,000 joules per kilogram there for portions of southwestern and northwestern Kansas, and that's exactly why these storms started blowing up there. But even across Texas and Oklahoma, we're getting nearly 5,000 joules per kilogram. As we now get to around 8 o'clock, so 7 o'clock Central, we're going to start seeing these big storms that develop now across Kansas here, already nearly 3,000 to possibly nearly 3,500 joules per kilogram. And once we get to around 11 o'clock and midnight, these Cape values will still be pretty high, nearly 3,000, but obviously the threat will kind of die off for tornadoes. As we now get to tomorrow, though, tomorrow around 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Central, just a few hours before the storms develop, we're already seeing nearly 4,600 joules per kilogram there, all the way from northwestern Texas to portions there of southeastern Kansas. By 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central is when those first storms and supercells start to develop across portions of southeastern Kansas, and that's exactly what we'll be seeing, nearly 4,100 to 4,200 joules per kilogram. But all the way down in northwestern Texas, we're getting over 5,500 joules per kilogram. So Cape will not be an issue tomorrow here as we get in the overnight hours here. I mean, these Cape values are going to be extremely high. Let's go ahead and look at the Helicity numbers here. So right now we are seeing a few storms across Nebraska and Kansas. Obviously, the Helicity is going to be very, very low here, SRH. But as we now go later on into around 5 o'clock here, 6 o'clock, we will start to see some better Helicity numbers from those cells that come in from Wyoming, all the way from maybe talking about anywhere from 300 to 600 meters squared per second squared. So we're talking some really high Helicity off the bat. But once we get to around 9 o'clock, we're getting numbers here from these supercells and embedded cells to bring it over 300 to possibly 500 meters squared per second squared. So SRH is not going to be issued from 0 to 1 kilometers. Let's go ahead and look at the 0 to 3 kilometers, and these numbers obviously going to be a lot more impressive here. Let's go to around 6 o'clock Eastern. We're already getting numbers up to 534 there for Nebraska. Starting to see those 200s increase around 300s there for Kansas, getting 500, possibly as high as maybe 700, maybe as high as maybe 1,000 plus for Helicity for 0 to 3 kilometers. So we're talking already really good numbers. As we now go tomorrow, though, tomorrow's when we start to see these numbers blowing up kind of a lot later there. Although we're going to start to see these storms blow up into the mid-afternoon and early evening, these Helicity numbers really won't be that good until once we get into it later into the overnight hours. So tomorrow's looking at a lot less significant compared to today. Last but not, or actually, let's go ahead and look now at the Superset composite parameter. So already seeing some pretty impressive numbers based on the timing, already getting up to nearly a 12 for those cells that are developing right now across Kansas and Colorado, which are severe warned. But as we get rapidly now into around 7 o'clock here, so 6 o'clock central, a big jump to around a 28 here on the scale for northwestern Kansas, and some widespread teens there across Nebraska into north central Kansas as we get later now into around 10 o'clock, so 9 o'clock central, already getting nearly a 35 on the scale. So we're talking really good probability for some supercells here, 35, widespread 20s there. So we're talking extreme supercells and really widespread supercells. Even to the overnight hours there, we're going to be seeing some numbers of over the high 30s. So we're talking still some really good probabilities for supercells in the overnight hours here. As we now get into tomorrow, though, like I did say, we will see some pretty impressive storms early on across Missouri there, and even Kansas City, getting up to some lower 30s and upper 20s. As we get later into the evening hours, we're going to get some really good numbers there all the way from northwestern Texas to portions of Oklahoma, getting into the 20s and 30s there. And then, of course, as we go overnight hours, those will die out. But the big threat, tornadoes. Let's go ahead and look at the significant tornado parameter. We are going to be seeing already 1s and 2s right now with those cells that we're seeing right now. But as we go later on, now it's at 7 o'clock Eastern and 6 o'clock Central, we're going to start getting these cells to become more tornadic. Specifically for western Kansas, we're going to get already an 8 on the scale there for 6 o'clock Central there for portions of northwestern Kansas. And going to get maybe around a 4 or 5 there for portions of western Nebraska there, kind of around the tip there of that moderate. As we get to 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central, we're going to be seeing some widespread areas of pretty good probability for tornadoes. Going to get up to around a 12 for south central Nebraska. Going to get some widespread, maybe 11 through 13 across southwestern Kansas. So going to be very widespread tornado threat. As we get to around midnight, so 11 o'clock central, that tornado threat is going to continue to increase there, getting a 21 there for portions of south central and central Kansas. So we're going to be seeing some tornadoes possibly into the early overnight hours, and then once we get later into the early morning hours tomorrow, that threat will obviously kind of die out. But we now get into tomorrow, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, we're going to start seeing some numbers there near Missouri, going to get possibly as high, maybe a 10 plus, and as well, like I did say, a tornado threat is likely, actually a pretty big tornado threat likely maybe for Texas, going to get as high as maybe a 13 there by 4 o'clock. And as we get later now into 6 o'clock, you're going to get up to a 21 on the scale there for the Texas Panhandle, with the other numbers being awfully low to maybe a 6 or 8 there across Missouri and portions of Kansas. And that threat will continue to increase as we get to Oklahoma. They're going to get possibly up to a 15 there for the Texas Panhandle, and almost anywhere from 5 to 9 there for the overnight hours. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm not sure if I'm going to stream here. I may be busy, but hope you guys stay safe and see you guys later.